Good evening. My name is Mike Russ, and on behalf of the host committee and the Men of Nehemiah, we want to welcome you to Have a Heart. Many of you are familiar with this ministry, but for those of you who are not, the Men of Nehemiah is a Christ-centered recovery and residential program for men dedicated to rebuilding their lives or their families that have been torn apart by the vicious onslaught of poverty, homelessness, substance abuse, crime, and violence. Hopefully at the end of this evening, you will understand why so many of us are passionate about this ministry. In 2010, almost exactly 5 years to this day, Louis Harrell Jr., Roger McCaslin, and a core team of individuals followed the call from God to bring the Men of Nehemiah to South Dallas. His father, Louis Harrell Sr., was a colonel and a minister in New Orleans, Louisiana, and was the founder of this program in 1994. His idea was to combine biblical and spiritual principles with military regimen to help his son overcome the trails of addiction. Louis Jr. battled addiction for 15 years and has experienced the transforming power of the gospel. After Hurricane Katrina, Louis Jr. was transplanted to Weatherford, Texas, and subsequently formed the Dallas location to carry on his father's legacy. He is a true leader of men praising God in their battle with addiction, homelessness, and incarceration. You will see his true passion for the men of the streets. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Louis Harrell Jr.
States military. Can you hear me now? Yes. And I was an only child, and I was very rebellious. Started doing drugs, and you know they just could not help me. They couldn't help me. I just kept. There's a cycle to addiction that until a person is ready, they're going to stay there. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But my father knew two things. He bled red, white, and blue, and he knew the power of Jesus Christ. And in the late 80s, early 90s, he used those two things, and he started the Men of Nehemiah with his love for me And I believe in faith he knew one day that I would get it together. Amazingly, God put a man in my life, and he's here tonight. And if you would stand up for a second, Roger McCaslin. I said, what do you do? And he said, I pioneer new ministries. And God is my witness, the hair stood up on the back of my head. I what little hair I have. And I said, I didn't say dude anymore. I said, Mr. McCaslin, would you come to my house? Please, sir. And for the next 8 months, this man of God mentored me and became my father. And discipled me and ushered me in the ministry. I want you to know in 5 years, we've seen some amazing stuff happen here in Nehemiah. We started with 3 guys. I think I got a whole bunch. Hey! No, we've had 87 graduates. We're talking 3 phases, 9 months, getting up at 5:30 in the morning, because what Daddy did, he took the discipline of the military, he took the traditional model of conflict case management and all of that, and then he took the power of the blood of Jesus. What we do to drop the defenses, what you're about to experience now, what we do, see, we sing and praise together. If addiction is a spiritual malady, victory for spiritual problems are won in praise. There's nothing in the world like masculine praise. Masculine praise is going to change the world. Trust me when I say it. And we go at it like we're crazy. Because the problem is crazy. 1, 2, 3, and
associate pastor of our church. So I grew up in a very Christian home, but with the discipline of the military. It was kind of tough. It was, a very high standard to live by. When I was a teenager, I was one of the leaders in the youth group. when I was 16, we went on a mission trip to St. Louis, Missouri, and I got the opportunity to preach at a halfway house in St. Louis. And at that point, I felt God calling me into full-time ministry whenever I got older. Well, I continued on in the youth group and was a leader in the youth group, and then I went to college at Howard Payne University. And shortly after I got there, my grandmother, who was very dear to me, passed away. And I went to her funeral, and a cousin of mine offered to smoke some pot with me after the funeral that night. And when I did, it just kind of numbed all that pain and all that confusion and everything. And that began to develop in me using drugs to cope with things that were going wrong in my life. And things just continually started going down. I went to prison 4 times, spent 9 years in the penitentiary. Well, this time when I went, my parents were just done with me. They loved me, but they just couldn't let me that close in their life again because I burnt that bridge and hurt them so many times that they just couldn't let me in anymore. So when I was fixing to get out in July, I called them and I asked them to, y'all aren't going to help me, but could y'all at least find me somewhere to go? Because when I get out, I don't have anywhere to live. And so they found me the minute Nehemiah. Since I've been here, when I got out, whenever I first got here, I did not want to be here. I just did 2 years in the penitentiary, and then they wanted me to go sign up for 9 months somewhere else, and I was like, man, that's a lot to swallow. I've got some things I want to do first. And they said no, and I was out about 3.5 hours before I walked in the front door. And when I got here, I thought, well, if I got to be here, I at least need to make the most of it. Right? Yeah. So I plugged in everything that I knew how at the time, and all my mentality was is I hope I can figure out how not to live the way that I was living anymore. I don't want to live that way anymore. And I had totally forgotten about the call that God had on my life. And for about the first month and a half that I was in the ministry, all I focused on was learning how to not live the way that I had begun to live. And then after probably about a month and a half in the ministry, I realized that it's not just about not living that way anymore, but it's about living my life in the calling that God's called me to. And I've been in the program for about 7.5 months. The last 5.5 months haven't really felt like I was in rehab. It felt like I was in ministry training, preparing me to go on for that next step of my life. That's what the men of Nehemiah have done for me. That's what God's done for me through the men of Nehemiah. And I'm just so grateful to be here and be a part of this wonderful ministry.
Pleased and honored to introduce our next speaker. Elmer Doty is a successful businessman, being part of the Carlisle's Group industrial, aerospace, and defense team since 1997. Even more important than that, though, is his passion for God and this ministry. He has a very powerful testimony to share with you tonight. I know you'll be moved by it as much as I was the first time I heard it. Ladies and gentlemen, Elmer Doty.
I'm always humbled to be in the presence of these great men. And I'd like to thank everyone for being here this evening as well. You know, I wish I could say that the Lord has always been a central part of my life, but He hasn't. From birth through my first marriage, I may have periodically gone to church, but never really felt that the Lord was actively involved. So in 2005, Sandra and I and our youngest son, Drew, lived in York, Pennsylvania. I received a call one night that our youngest daughter, Liz, who lived with her mother in Missouri, had been in a serious car accident. She'd fallen asleep while driving and run off the road, and her fiancé was thrown from the car. She was only a little banged up, praise God, but her fiancé had suffered a serious brain injury and was in a coma from which he would never awake. So we suggested that Liz come live with us, but she declined. Though she was emotionally devastated, she seemed to bounce back, and after a semester, went off again to college. A few months later, we sold the company that I was with, and in early 2006, moved to Dallas. We would continue to see Liz at holidays and on vacations, and we'd talk often on the phone. And she seemed to be doing okay. Had a job, back in college, seemed very upbeat. But in June 2007, she called, and a small voice asked if she could spend some time with us. When we brought her to Dallas, it was apparent she was not well. She was clearly struggling with emotional problems, was taking both anti-anxiety medication and painkillers, and in fact had a seizure on her arrival at DFW. So we immediately got her under medical care. As she was 20 years old, the doctors really couldn't and wouldn't tell us much about what was going on. But somehow they signaled that an intervention was necessary. So Liz refused to enter any sort of formal rehab, so Sandra took over, taking her to a psychiatrist, then to counseling, and then to a recovery group. But you know, Liz had changed. She now was very evasive and, in fact, sometimes dishonest. We lived in a house in a gated neighborhood, and she had no car, so we were able to exert some control. But you know, having a troubled adult child in the house was really stressful for everybody. But she made progress. You know, that summer, I had an unusual amount of business travel. We weren't letting her return to Missouri, and we weren't going to leave her at home. So we bundled her up, and Sandra and Liz and our youngest son, Drew, accompanied me all through China, through Japan, to London, Paris, Rome, and a number of other places. That summer became like one long family vacation, and we did a lot of very special things together. It was a wonderful blessing, and better yet, Liz seemed to be increasingly stabilizing. In August, she celebrated her 21st birthday, and in September started back to college. You know, there were a couple of bumps in the road, but generally things seemed to be progressing well. By the time Christmas approached, we had become invested in our church. Liz would often attend with us. In early December, Michael and Lloyd Powell and Susan and Stephen Butt, who many of you know, gave us a wonderful party to better introduce us to a number of couples from the church, including the pastor and his wife. Then a few days before Christmas, we put Liz on a plane to visit her mom in Missouri, and Sandra and I went to our vacation house to get ready for all the kids to arrive the day after Christmas. It was going to be a joyous time. On December 23rd, we received a call that Liz had died the prior night in her bed at her mother's house. She'd gone out that night with her old friends. She'd apparently died from an overdose of painkillers that they had given her. So Sandra and I got back to Dallas late on Christmas Eve and went straight to the church, catching the last 10 minutes of the evening service. We approached the pastor we had just met a few days before, Jim Dennis, who took us to his office, and we talked late into the evening. The one thing that stuck with me after that night was, among all the things Jim had said, was that God will redeem all that he allows. You know, the trip to Missouri for the funeral was the hardest, most painful thing I've ever done. And you know, at the visitation, the parents of Liz's best childhood friend sought me out and said that they loved Liz like their own and would take her to church with them. They wanted me to know that they had been with her the day that she had gone forward and accepted Jesus as her personal Savior. And so the next day was a dreary day in the snow when we put Liz to rest. But I knew in my heart she was at peace. I was Liz's father, and it's my job to protect her. And all I could do is think about all the things I could and should have done that might have made a difference. I could have been a better father, a better husband in the first marriage. We could have jumped the moment I thought there was something amiss. We could have taken her away from my ex. We could have, a thousand things. You can go on and on and on and beat yourself to death forever. But what I've gotten from just being with these fellows, I mean, you know, you think of the biblical principles. What really has struck me and what you helped me with is biblical principle number 12. Please say it with me. We believe that every man must learn to forgive himself and others so he can experience the forgiveness of God. I do know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God will redeem all that he allows. Our lives have been completely changed regarding service. Our experience is why we identify with and support the men of Nehemiah. See, I'm broken too. And I would like to say to everybody in this room, this is a critically important mission. And it may be all that stands between some of these men and the fate that our daughters suffer. I pray for your support, and thank you, and God bless.
This ministry is redeeming lives on a daily basis. It is bringing fathers back to their children, restoring marriages and families, and bringing men off the streets and out of prison and jail. It is where restored men are leading their families, inspiring their communities, empowering other men, and serving as a witness of hope to the world. Through testimony, as we saw tonight, it allows others to witness the power of God. This is a place where men on their last leg can come and receive love and God's grace. If you come down to the men of Nehemiah, you will see how much unconditional love there is at this organization. We need your financial help in supporting this ministry. This is a capital campaign to raise $1.35 million to purchase 4 existing buildings and 2 lots. These buildings currently are being used by the men to house, feed, counsel, and spiritualize. The program is currently on a very lean, low budget of approximately $740 per man per month to do all of the above. Securing ownership of these buildings will save approximately $150,000 a year and enable these funds to be used for future growth of the program. I want to thank all of y'all for being here this evening, for having a heart for the men of Nehemiah. Colonel Lewis wanted to have one last song to jam, as he calls it.
Men of Nehemiah, we got the best band in town. Check this out. Where you at, Fundraiser? Where you at, Alan? Check this out. Y'all feel this. 1, 2, 3, ha! Hey, y'all clap. Let's put some move with it. will come from word.